Okay, hey everyone, to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a really cool JDM Seiko for you. A little bit about the brand. They were founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and now have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. And in terms of the type of watch, this is an everyday watch. Some key characteristics, and when you're looking for something you can wear every day, you're really just going to be looking for that versatile blend of sporty and dressy attributes. This is the JDM Seiko TicTac collaboration SZSB021, and it's the 35th anniversary limited edition. Now, this particular model does fall under their standard SZSB line, which I have reviewed on the channel before. Definitely check the history for that. And it's really meant to be a line of everyday mechanical watches in the vein of the famous SZSB035 and 033 on the dressy side, as well as having the another side on the sports side that is more akin to the SZSB017. This takes that an extra step and really leans into that Alpinist vibe, and I have to say I'm very, very impressed. This piece was actually lent into the channel from our friends over at Belmont Watches locally in San Diego. You can purchase this exact unit from them for $650 pre-owned, and I have to say it's really cool to finally get to see this one in the metal because it is so limited. Now, with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so as you can see, very, very handsome piece. This deep green dial, some will describe it as almost like a British racing green. I'll say it almost even has some hints of blue in there, so I think it's almost like a dark teal, or maybe like a hunter green. Very, very cool. And I have to say, I probably am not going to be able to do the best job capturing this particular dial because, of course, once I get the light onto it, this crystal doesn't have any anti-reflective coating, so it's going to give you a lot of reflections. I would say, of course, in real life, you're not going to have studio lights reflecting off of this, so you're actually going to be able to notice you're going to be able to enjoy the dial quite a bit more than probably you're going to be able to see here. But when we get to that low light transition portion, I think you'll be able to get a better look. Now, a little bit about some of the specs here. It's 40 millimeters in diameter and only about 38 millimeters at the bezel, so very wearable from that perspective. It does have a thickness of about 13 millimeters, and that's including the crystal there. And it does wear the weight nicely, very thin mid case. You can see very defined kind of bubble back there, and then bezel on top. So it does keep everything nice and tidy. You can also see the drilled lugs. The lug to lug is only 48 millimeters, so very, very wearable, and it is mostly polished with a bit of brushing on the very top surfaces of these lug horns. Now, getting into the crystal, you're going to be getting a single domed hardlex. So when you do have it at quite harsh angles, you are going to get a bit of distortion there, but only when you really get into those sharp angles. But otherwise, you're going to see very, very legible, from most angles there. And I think that's one of kind of the beauties of this piece is it really stands out as just a very classy kind of dressy outdoors watch. Now, instead of having a rotating internal bezel like an Alpinist, you just have a regular fixed bezel, and it's very clean. You're getting a push-pull crown, which is unsigned. And then inside, you're going to see Seiko's workhorse 4R35 movement, which has a 40-hour power reserve, 3 hertz, or beating at 21,600 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. And you can see TicTac limited edition 10 bar water resistant, so even though it's just a push-pull crown, as long as that crown is pushed in, you'll definitely be good to go in terms of water resistance. Then we get into really this dial, which I think is what everybody's going to love. Actually, what I can do is let me cut away and switch up to something that might be able to highlight the dial just a little bit better. Okay guys, as you can see, really beautiful dial. That color, again, it does have just a hint of a blue tone to it, which looks really gorgeous. And you can see those indices, guys, are, wow, they have some beautiful finishing work on there that really gives them almost a kind of tesseract like finish, to where it's just shifting and grabbing the light in a really beautiful way. So really fantastic, I have to say. Very impressive, especially for a watch of this ilk. I mean, this is, although it is limited, I mean, this is also a very entry level piece. It was meant to be worn, and you know, you can see here up close that the previous owner did wear this piece. And I think that's one of the nice things too about picking up something like this, is that you have something where you're not afraid to damage it, even though it is limited, because it is definitely meant to be worn. And my gosh, that is just gorgeous. Look at the, woo, quite nice, guys. Very cool. So with that said, let's actually get this piece out on the wrist so we can see how it wears. Okay guys, now while I think whoever purchases this piece, of course, is not going to wear it on this OEM strap, you can see that it is still in very nice condition, especially with that deployant. And then with the lug width being 20 millimeters and having drilled lugs, this is going to be an absolute strap monster. And I can just, you know, pretty much anything that would look great with, you know, with the Alpinist is going to look pretty great here. And even the strap is very reminiscent of that SZSB017. But of course, if I have the watch a little bit too close to the lens, you're going to have a bit of perspective distortion. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low and just tighten the shot up here so you guys can get a detailed look while still keeping a truer aspect ratio of how this may sit on your own wrist. Now, although I do have a wrist on the larger side at 7.5 inches, I will say I have a relatively round wrist. As you can see, it's not flat and wide. So that doesn't mean that, you know, just because it looks good on my wrist, it's because I have some huge canvas to put it on. I don't have an especially flat wrist. So you can see even somebody with a smaller wrist would really be able to pull this off quite easily. It fits. It just does all those tricks that Seiko does with ergonomics in terms of having those curvatures, everything being turned down, all the levels of polish there, all the little broken levels in terms of having a separation in between the mid case, the bezel, and the case back. So wears like an absolute dream from that perspective. You guys can see it looks absolutely great. So with that said, let's go ahead, get it off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, it's really just going to be that handset, unfortunately. So you're not really gonna be able to tell time too easily in the dark, at least in pitch black. But when it comes to a medium lighting situation, even a very faint lighting situation, now the beauty of those indices really comes into play. Look at the way that they grab the light. And one thing I always like to work in, of course, is a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. Oh, also I noticed that the Lumarite they use here is blue, which is very special and not super common within Seiko. So very cool. I think the baby Alpinist uses blue Lumabrite as well in terms of its glow. So very nice. But you guys can see just a little bit of light, and look at the way the light hits those indices. Those are gorgeous. Wow. Whew. Because yeah, I mean, you're not always going to be in direct sunlight, which my studio lights do a really good job of simulating. Really, a lot of times you might be coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So maybe even include some harsh lighting, which, wow, really brings out that dial. You're not going to see a lot of production defects or anything, just a little bit of daily wear and tear here. But my gosh, that dial, does it ever just look gorgeous. I love how vibrant it is, and hopefully you guys can see that little tint of blue and that teal like nature that kind of comes out there. Very, very cool. All right, guys, closing thoughts on the wrist. This really wears perfectly for everyday wear. You know, a lot of that kind of classic Seiko Alpinist design cue, a lot of them are just worked into there. But it's also rolled into a well-balanced package where it's not a dedicated field watch. It's not going to be super thick or anything like that. You know, not that it's ultra thin, but you are getting those a couple of those benefits in terms of it just being more of a daily watch versus a dedicated field piece. Now, in terms of model variants, there are various JDM TicTac collaborations available. Typically, these sell out pretty fast and do go up in value. You can even see this model. You know, I think $650 is a pretty fair price, especially since it's here stateside. Now you can find cheaper models, but then you're gonna have to import them, and then depending on the rules for your state, you might get charged with use tax or something like that, which is no fun. So yeah, I try to avoid that whenever possible. So it's nice that, yeah, these are already here and you're not importing it, right? So another nice benefit. And then in terms of comparable models, sure, the standard, you know, less attractive SZSB line, they're still available somewhat. They're a little harder to find, and they do have similar specs. You can get them for less. You could even, I guess, even go upstream and pick up a baby Alpinist that's going to have superior specs, but you wouldn't have something as special or collectible like this. When this came out, I want to say it came out right before a lot of the other Alpinist variants came out, and this was just like, this is what people wanted. I mean, still, the baby Alpinist doesn't have applied indices like this does, and these indices are just gorgeous. So I think there's a market for this, and the right passionate person will really, really enjoy this one. So with that said, guys, bottom line, if you've been searching for this particular reference, you know, their values aren't dropping, so you may as well pull the trigger on this puppy right here. You know, it's in decent condition, it's in wearing condition, and I think this is the type of watch that should be worn. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.